Hello and welcome to episode 6 of VMware Today, XenTegra's podcast all about the VMware portfolio. We cover everything from core vSphere to ARIA and management products all the way up to the cloud and security here on this podcast. I'm joined today with Rizwan Shaihk and Donovan Linton. Rizwan, good morning. How are you doing?
I'm doing absolutely fine, Philip. How about you?
Doing well. Rizwan is our resident EUC expert. Rizwan, you spent some time at VMware, didn't you?
Yeah, that's correct. So I've been talking and working around on end user computing technologies involving both Space1 and Horizon. And looking at Horizon, you touch base on a lot of resources, right? Right from storage and optimization of storage. So yeah, I mean, this topic would be pretty much interesting for all of us to know how VMware, vSphere, VVOLS features, VVOLS capabilities can help in optimizing and enhancing the storage capabilities for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if there's something that EUC needs to run well, it's good core infrastructure, right? So
Absolutely.
this definitely goes to that topic. And then Donovan, our good friend from XenTegra Gov, Donovan's an SE on that side. Donovan, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well, Mr. Phil. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Donovan, how long have you been on staff? Yeah, I know you joined just a little after me.
Yep, I've been on staff for 5 months now, I think is the time period, starting from February.
Yeah.
And I actually come from the other side of the fence, having been at Citrix for the prior 13 years before that.
So yeah, Rizwan versus Donovan, the ultimate cage match. We got to set it up sometime. Yeah, Donovan, you focus mostly on our gov customers, so state and local education as well as federal customers. How are things going in that space?
It's going great, and you forgot one, which is our healthcare customers as well.
That's right. Yeah, any publicly funded healthcare. Yeah, and that's a big thing with us at XenTegra and XenTegra Gov is we love our healthcare customers. The EUC story resonates very, very strongly inside of the healthcare customers because everybody loves the follow me user experience. You walk up to a terminal, you tap, you move to a new clinical room or to a new workstation and tap, and your whole desktop relaunches and instantly you're back at work. So we do love the healthcare experience an awful lot.
Yeah, absolutely. We're seeing a lot of traction in that, especially with healthcare and looking at thin client devices such as IGL and Imprivata to enhance that experience.
Absolutely. And that's one of the key differences. I mean, we were together this week or last week, I guess now we're starting a new week, but last week at our mid-year kickoff, and that was my key takeaway. It was, our superpower is really around helping our vendor partners integrate together so that our customer partners get a great end user solution. And that seems to be our superpower. Put you on the spot. What was your key takeaway from last week?
It was the same, really understanding all the capabilities of the extended organization, learning the specialties that we have from the security practice being one, and our new, was it Aaron? Aaron, who just also recently started within the past couple of weeks. So really understanding like how we as a company are able to help customers regardless of which stage they are in.
Absolutely. And Rizwan, we missed you at the event. I know Canada was not a part of the mid-year. It was just our US folks, but things are going well up in Canada too. I hear great things coming from your team. What sorts of things you have in the hopper and been working on?
Yeah, we've been working with a lot of opportunities here in Canada as well, and then probably talking about Workspace1 for device management as well as the Horizon part. Typically, the healthcare customers, actually, a lot of healthcare customers who are predominantly looking for the use cases that you just mentioned. And for them, it's definitely the stability that they need, the seamless access and security that they need across. And that's something they pretty much depend on the virtualization capability of Horizon.
Yeah, and Workspace ONE is a huge topic
Yeah,
for us. It's one where I want to dive in directly, not only to Workspace ONE, but all of the different integrations VMware offers with ServiceNow. ServiceNow being a
that's true.
huge practice for us here at XenTegra, we see a lot of opportunity for customers to get more value out of both VMware and ServiceNow. So that's going to be a teaser for an upcoming podcast here on VMware Today, talking about all the different ServiceNow integrations we've got going on.
That would be really interesting to know. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to get Fred, our our ServiceNow practice lead, over on the podcast with us. For those of you who are interested in ServiceNow, that's also a podcast that we've got. You can find it at the same place you found this podcast. Just look for XenTegra ServiceNow, and it's really worth a listen. It's a great resource for people interested in ServiceNow. Well, today's topic is really going to be around VMware Core Storage. We've got a new version, vSphere 8, that came out, September of last year. And so we really want to delve into what's new in core storage. So that's where we're going to focus today. We've got a little blog post or a technical article to help us out, but I'm curious, Rizwan, Donovan, both of you come from a VMware and Citrix EUC practice. Are you familiar with topics like NVMe over Fabric or VVOLS?
Yeah, typically when we talk about the sizing part of the design part of Horizon, we talk more on how do we optimize IOPS, how do we manage the storage part. And here we talk about a lot of technologies on NVMe or simple SSD, right from SSDs to NVMe. And then we look for, and what I see here is a lot of our customers look for having an optimization, having a way to optimize the storage part. And this is where most of the UC design is relying on. Mm-hmm. You have, of course, CPU as well as memory, but then storage is something that that becomes pretty unstable if not being designed properly. And this is where I believe that we usually talk about a lot of the third-party components as well to manage all of these storage solutions.
And how about you, Donovan? I mean, from your Citrix background, I mean, storage is a huge component there. You run into some of these newer technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you know, as Rizwan pointed out, storage is actually a huge component of designing any type of environment. I always like to describe storage as like the older kid who blames everything else on the little kids, because everyone looks at the memory, everyone looks at the CPU, but a lot of times it's the storage that's overlooked, and the storage that's the problem and performance related issues. So storage is always a big topic, especially in design and supporting performance type issues from an EUC perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah,
yep.
I mean, it's a critical component. In the beginning, there was two choices when it came to vSphere storage. There were NFS, and then there was VMFS for shared storage. VMFS, the virtual machine file system, I think that's what it stands for. Somebody can call me out in the comments if I got that wrong and butchered it. But VMFS and NFS were our two choices for a very long time. But a few years ago, VMware came out with a couple new options. We did a previous session focused on vSAN, and that introduced the idea of storage-based or storage policy-based management. And the idea that you could set policies around virtual machines and have those policies automatically control the IOPS, the amount of resources, other things at the core storage system, and basically apply those policies across your system. And at the same time, VMware came out with something called Virtual Volumes, or VVOLS. And believe it or not, we're on version 5 of VVOLS spec. And most people, I would gather, haven't really heard about VVOLS. I guess let's start here. Donovan, what do you know about VMware vVols?
That was going to be a great opening question for me because I was going to ask you from the non-VMware guy to give a good overview of what vVols is. Of course, in the past, I've worked with the VMFS file storage, and I think I have that set up in my home lab today. I've played around with the vSAN, of course, because VMware is very much putting that in your face, especially with version 8. But vVols, I do not have a lot of experience with.
So that just reinforces kind of the same thing. I mean, Donovan's an amazing technologist, and he's been in the industry for a long time. But most people haven't heard of this technology from VMware. And so that's really where I want to spend some time, because I may be one of the few customers in my past life where we bought into this concept significantly because it simplified management of our storage to a great degree. It also unlocked capabilities we didn't have inside of VMFS. So vVols is an API-based implementation with storage. So where your traditional VMFS is, either iSCSI or fiber channel attached storage from a shared storage array to your hosts, vVols is going to use the same SCSI connections, but it's going to do an API integration where vSphere can talk directly to the storage array, and you no longer have to manage individual LUNs. It's going to create native objects on the storage array, and each VM, each disk of each VM, each config file of each VM becomes its own volume, essentially its own LUN on the storage array, and the API integration is what powers that. So it allows vSphere to be more in control on that external storage array. Does that make sense, what I'm saying, or do we need to go a little deeper?
From my side, that
No,
makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense, Philip. But let me ask you this: like talking about when we talk about Horizon and a virtual desktop infrastructure where design plays an important role here, how does vVol or how vVol can help in optimizing the storage for virtual desktop infrastructure?
So the great thing is that you're no longer limited by the number of LUNs that you have and the capacity of the LUNs. You can get access to the entire storage array. And so it allows you to scale things further with the existing storage array. So rather than an arbitrary limit, based on the number of LUNs you've carved out, you get access to whatever amount of the storage resource pool you've exposed to your vSphere cluster. So again, it helps simplify the management overall, because you're not managing at a LUN level. And then two, each of those individual disks can have its own quality of service settings. You can set limits or you can set guarantees depending on the storage array you're working with for how many IOPS you get for each one of those VMs. So the noisy neighbor problems that we've had in VMFS go away, because you can actually do QoS guarantees or QoS maximums on each individual disk inside of a virtual machine.
Awesome. Does that mean that now you don't have to depend on LUNs to be managed across and do that? A lot of configurations that we do it to manage the LUNs, we don't have to do it with vVols.
Exactly. Those things disappear with vVols.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it is. It's truly great stuff, because it allows you to scale further, and it allows some of the traditional problems we've had. How many virtual machines should we put on a VMFS? When does it become saturated? All of those kinds of things. What size? I mean, arbitrarily, do you choose a terabyte? Do you choose 10 terabytes? What size VMFS LUNs do you create? You don't manage it that way anymore. And so it really does open up some new capabilities. with the newest release
Right.
here from vSphere, vSphere 8, and particularly vSphere 8 Update 1, we've got a number of improvements that have come out, including the introduction of a new API endpoint. So I mentioned that VVOLS have this API integration. Well, vSphere has to talk with something, and so that's called a VASA provider. And the new version is called VASA 5. It's a new specification, and it has a number of different things that are useful from an administrative and an operational standpoint. So the VASA provider is again just that API integration that vSphere talks to. And so VMware has defined this API set, and they've worked with all the major storage vendors, so Dell, HPE, NetApp, Pure Storage. Matter of fact, Pure Storage, when we're talking VVOLS, was a reference architecture and a very close partner with VMware when they were creating the VVOL architecture. So they have a really particularly great VVOL implementation if you're looking for a storage partner there. But that's a different rabbit hole. So VASA is created by VMware, but implemented on the storage array by our storage partners. So again, your HPEs, your NetApps, Pure Storage, Dell, EMC, they have implementations of VASA that run on their arrays, and that's where vSphere is going to communicate. So again, a few new things that have come out. What in our blog post kind of stands out to you when we start looking at VASA features that have come out, Donovan?
Actually, sorry, I was looking for the mute button there. I started reading over the article this morning, so I think some of the things that initially stand out is the certificate management that's included with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as we're talking about an API endpoint, we've got to talk about certificates. It's kind of a pain in the neck, but this is something that has to happen because VMware has to trust the endpoint that it's talking to, and so it takes the certificate and adopts it, and then eventually that certificate's going to die. So making sure that you can refresh that certificate safely is a huge deal. VMware's done a good job of creating this architecture, so it's a single click button, and you get the new certificate from your storage array, and everything continues to talk. So the great thing about the VASA architecture is that even if vSphere loses connection to its VASA provider, it doesn't lose connection to all of those virtual machines and their disks and other elements on the storage array. It'll continue to use those. It just can't power on or power off because it can't talk to that management layer. And so VASA ends up being just that management layer for you. Rizwan, what about you? What stands out?
Well, I'm specifically looking at, talking about security. Most of the customers that I deal with usually have a concern on the security, and specifically they are concerned of not using the self-signed certificate. We usually want to go with third-party SSL-based certificates. And if you look at the government organizations, Donovan, you may agree to this, you would always look at the government organizations who are more focused on compliance. They would really look at having a provision to deploy a third-party certificate or a certificate that they can handshake without having a self-signed one, actually. That's something which is pretty obvious for the security compliance part that we deal with every now and then with the customers. And this plays a very important role specifically when we talk about government organizations, we talk about banking or financial organizations.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so the enhancements here are really around eliminating those self-signed certificates and making sure that we have things that will pass that muster as well. So definitely one of those things where we have to make sure that we are up to the standards required by our vendors or by our governing bodies. So for me, one of the things that stands out is VASA 5 remains backwards compatible. So, if you're in a situation where you're in a co-location, maybe an older array doesn't talk the version 5, you're still able to make benefits and stuff of it, but you also aren't locked into a particular version. You're able to get into things for the future. So that's hugely important to me. We run these compatibility matrices and things like that as operational folks. And so anything that really helps us with backwards compatibility is a huge benefit in my book. One of the other major things that came out is NVMe TCP support for VVOLS. So I think we're going to end up having to save NVMe over Fabric for an entirely different podcast, but I did want to mention that VVOLS is starting to see support for NVMe over Fiber Channel and things like that in the future. So our industry, when it comes to storage, is really being changed, and we're seeing this move from the SCSI protocols that we've known in the past. I mentioned that traditional VVOLS up until now have always used the SCSI protocol, but with version 8 now we're seeing the ability to use NVMe to talk. And I guess from your perspective, Rizwan, you were talking about NVMe earlier.
Yeah.
What do you see as the benefits there?
Well, one bit of a query actually that I have here is when we talk about NVMe TCP, especially when we talk about storage, we usually talk about how fast we can process storage, how resilient it can be, how stable it can be. And when we talk about like fast communication, don't you think TCP, a three-way handshake protocol, would actually slow down the communication or would affect the communication in another way? Like how is that being optimized here at VVOLS?
Yeah, I mean, again, it pushes the boundaries of what we're doing in terms of connectivity. You're starting to see, as we discussed a couple weeks ago, we have the benefit, the requirement now of moving from 10 gig to 25 gig to support vSAN ESA. So we're going to see similar changes here as it evolves and as NVMe over Fabric continues to push the boundaries of how much volume we're pushing over the Ethernet stack. So, again, there's a lot of requirements for things to be close and well connected. We're not talking about NVMe over Fabric, extending between long distances. We're at the very beginning of this NVMe Fabric discussion where things are still going to have to be in the same data center and very well connected. But I think that's really one of the things that we talk about when we start talking NVMe over TCP is just the bandwidth requirements that are going to be there. It's going to push, higher, well-connected fabrics for our storage and for our networks. I think that's going to be one of the eventual outcomes or requirements that we see as we talk about this technology.
Wonderful. And it does support multipathing as well between multiple storage protocols like SCSI or NVMe or, for that matter, SSD as well.
So not necessarily over different protocols, but definitely multipathing inside of the NVMe over Fabric. And I think that's a great place for us to break for today's podcast. And then we'll have to wait and follow up on a deeper dive of NVMe over Fabric. It's a huge topic when we talk about changes to core storage. So we're going to have to save that for part 2. But guys, I really appreciate you jumping on and starting the discussion, walking through VVOLS, and we'll follow up with part 2 here in the next week or so.
Awesome.
Well, on behalf of XenTegra, Donovan, and Rizwan, we want to thank you for joining us today for this podcast, and we really appreciate you taking a little bit of time out. So hopefully we talked enough about VVOLS and their benefits to pique your interest. if you check out the notes on this particular podcast, we'll include a link where you can find out more. And we'll follow up with part 2 as we delve deeper into the storage stack and NVMe over Fabric. Donovan, thanks for joining.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for having me.
And Rizwan, thank you for your time today too.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Until next time, everyone, we'll see you soon.